Human saved two alien sisters from crashed ship. Both became his wives. Michael Reyes stood on the ridge of a silent, dust-choked canyon, his geological scanner humming a monotonous tune that echoed the solitude of his life on the moon designated Xylo 7. For 3 years, this crimson wasteland had been his entire universe, a self-imposed exile where the only surprises were subsurface mineral deposits and the occasional meteor shower that painted fleeting streaks of fire across the black sky. But the streak of fire currently tearing through the thin atmosphere was no meteor. It was trailing smoke and shedding metal. Its trajectory, a terminal death spiral aimed directly at the plains beyond his outpost. The monotonous hum of the scanner died as he lowered it, his nucleus tightening on the grip. Professional habit warred with the instinct to stay hidden, to remain separate. The habit won. He turned without a second thought, his long strides eating up the distance back to the small, domed habitat half buried in the rust-colored rock. Inside, the recycled air was a balm against the thin, metallic tang of the moon. He didn't waste a motion, pulling a comprehensive med kit from its wall locker and slinging a heavy survival pack over his shoulders. Seconds later, he was climbing into the cockpit of his rover, its 6 heavy-duty wheels designed to crawl over the unforgiving terrain. The engine growled to life, and he gunned it toward the column of black smoke now staining the horizon. He reached the impact site to a scene of violent stillness. A furrow the length of a transport ship was gouged into the crimson plains, culminating in a chaotic nest of twisted, non-human alloys. The metal itself was a strange, pearlescent white, now scorched and peeled back like bark from a tree. The air, thick with the smell of ozone and a sweet, cloying scent like burnt sugar, was eerily quiet. The profound silence that followed such a cataclysm was more unnerving than the crash itself. Michael grabbed a cutting torch and his medkit, his boots sinking into the disturbed dust as he approached the main hull breach, a gaping wound in the ship's side. He peered into the shadowed interior, his helmet lamps cutting through the gloom. And then he saw them. 2 females. The larger one was on her knees, her body a living shield over a smaller, slighter form, lying motionless on the deck plating. Even in the dim light, he could see her skin was a pale, cool lavender, marked with faint silver patterns that seemed to pulse with a soft internal light. He took a single step forward, and she moved with the speed of a striking predator. She was on her feet, a blade of shimmering, white-hot plasma hissing to life in her hand. Before he could react, its tip was pressed against the composite material of his throat seal. Her eyes, brilliant violet, burned with a protective fire that transcended language. The silver patterns on her skin flared, glowing with a defensive fury that made the air crackle. Michael froze, not in fear, but in careful assessment. He did not reach for the pistol at his hip. Instead, he slowly raised his empty hands, palms open. He held her furious gaze, then deliberately lowered his eyes to the advanced medkit secured at his belt. He tapped it twice with his fingers, then pointed from the kit to the unmoving figure on the floor behind her. He made a slow, gentle motion, mimicking the application of a bandage. Help. The gesture was universal. A low moan escaped the lips of the injured one. Her body twitched, a spasm of pure agony. Michael saw the patterns on her deeper violet skin flicker like a dying bulb. The light was weak, erratic. The sight broke the warrior's focus. Her violet eyes darted to her sister, fear momentarily eclipsing the rage. The plasma blade wavered, its tip dipping by a centimeter. It was the only invitation he would get. She reluctantly lowered her weapon, though her stance remained coiled, ready to strike. Michael moved past her, his boots clanking on the alien metal, and knelt beside the smaller female. He activated his medical scanner, the device emitting a low trill as it swept over her. The display lit up with readouts he could barely decipher, but the cascading red alerts for internal trauma were unmistakable. As the scanner worked, he saw it up close. The intricate silver patterns on both of their bodies were dim, unstable, a faltering luminescence that his scanner didn't register, but his eyes told him was a sign of something deeply wrong, something beyond the physical wounds of the crash. A sudden synthetic voice cut through the tense silence, startling them both. Proximity alert. Corrosive dust storm approaching. Estimated arrival, 17 minutes. It was the rover's automated system, its external sensors tracking the moon's lethal weather patterns. Michael looked up at the warrior, then pointed through the hull breach at the horizon. It was already darkening, a rolling red-black wall of dust gathering speed. He pointed to himself, then to them, and then back in the direction of his habitat. Shelter. Survival. The words didn't matter. The meaning was plain. He saw the understanding in her eyes, followed by a wave of desperate resignation. They were trapped. They had no other choice. He worked with the wary Vestra, their movements tense and unsynchronized as they secured the unconscious Lyra onto the collapsible transport stretcher from his rover. The forced cooperation was a fragile truce born of sheer necessity, a silent agreement between a human and an alien warrior under a hostile sky. With Lyra secured, they began the desperate journey back, the rover carving a path across the plains. Behind them, the sky turned to a churning, ominous maw as the first gusts of the storm began to whip the crimson dust into a frenzy, turning their rescue into a frantic race against the clock. The rover lurched, Michael gritting his teeth as a sudden crosswind slammed into the vehicle, nearly tearing the stretcher from Vestra's grasp. Visibility was a cruel joke. The crimson dust storm, now a solid, roiling wall of particulate matter that threatened to blind his sensors. He fought the controls, the wheels hydroplaning across slick, pulverized regolith. The corrosive wind, a physical assault against the open-bed transport. Vestra, her pale lavender skin streaked with grime and blood, braced Lyra's unconscious form with dogged drive, her body shielding her sister from the worst of the abrasive grit. Every shudder of the rover, every violent buffet, was a fresh tremor of fear in Michael's chest. They were running out of time. Then a flicker. The automated exterior light of his habitat, a dim beacon through the maelstrom. He wrestled the rover into the habitat's small external airlock chamber, the roar of the storm temporarily muted as the outer door hissed shut behind them. Decontamination cycles whirred to life, a fine mist enveloping the rover, scrubbing away the moon's toxic embrace. Michael didn't wait for the full cycle. He hit the inner door override. It cycled open, revealing the main living module, a stark, practical space that now felt like a sanctuary. The purified air, crisp and cool, washed over them, a stark contrast to the choked, superheated chaos they'd just escaped. "Here," Michael ordered, his voice tight with urgency, indicating a specialized medical cot tucked into a corner. He helped Vestra lift Lyra, easing her gently onto the sterile surface. The younger alien was completely limp, her violet skin unnaturally pale. Vestra's eyes, though, still held a feral wariness as she quickly scanned the interior. A meticulously organized array of consoles, a compact kitchen unit, a workbench laden with tools and storage lockers. It was a fusion of living quarters, workshop, and now makeshift medical bay. Her gaze lingered on the cot, then flicked back to Michael. He ignored her, pulling his portable medical scanner from a wall-mounted kit. Its soft blue light swept over Lyra, and the readouts on the small screen immediately painted a grim picture. Multiple internal hemorrhages, organ damage, a fractured tibia. Her silver skin patterns, which had been erratic in the wreckage, now flickered with alarming irregularity, barely visible beneath the pale violet. Each pulse seemed to diminish, like a dying star. Vestra remained rooted a few feet away, her hand hovering near the plasma blade she'd sheathed at her hip. Her posture was tense, every muscle coiled, observing Michael's every move, ready to react if his intentions deviated from the purely medical. He could feel her distrust, a tangible presence in the small module. Michael's brow furrowed. His standard medical supplies were designed for human physiology, not whatever unique biology Lyra possessed. He moved to his workbench, grabbing a terraforming diagnostics unit, a robust, multispectral scanner normally used for subsurface mineral analysis and atmospheric composition. With practiced, efficient movements, he began recalibrating it, jury-rigging connections, and rewriting the diagnostic protocols on the fly. He needed something more robust, more adaptable. He needed to understand what was happening to her. A sharp, ragged gasp tore from Lyra's throat. Her body seized, a violent tremor shaking the cot. Her breathing became shallower, a faint wheezing sound that barely moved the air. The silver patterns on her skin, already dim, now winked out almost completely, leaving only the dull lavender. Michael's adapted scanner shrieked, displaying a rapidly declining, unique biological energy signature. She was fading, literally. "Hold her head!" Michael snapped, his voice cutting through Vestra's silent suspicion. His protective instincts, long dormant, flared to life, overriding caution. "She's seizing! Keep her still!" He didn't ask. He commanded. His focus was absolute, his competence undeniable in the face of death. Vestra hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The undeniable medical urgency, Michael's calm, commanding authority, broke through her hostility. Grudgingly, she moved, her warrior training kicking in. Her strong hands, precise and steady despite their reluctance, cradled Lyra's head, preventing it from striking the cot as another tremor racked her sister's body. Working in strained tandem, Michael secured Lyra to the cot with specialized medical restraints, designed to hold patients steady during orbital transfers. He then assembled a makeshift fluid and nutrient drip from his lab supplies, a clear tube connecting to a port he'd found on Lyra's arm. The pale green liquid began to flow, a desperate attempt to stabilize her basic metabolic functions. For a moment, Lyra's tremors eased. Her breathing, while still shallow, became less ragged, a temporary reprieve. "Your arm," Michael said, his voice softer now, once Lyra's vitals showed a fractional, temporary stabilization. He gestured to the deep laceration on Vestra's forearm, still oozing dark blood. Vestra flinched, pulling back instinctively, her fists tight, but she met his gaze, saw the unwavering command in his brown eyes. With a sigh that sounded more like a growl, she extended her arm. The antiseptic stung as Michael cleaned the wound, his touch unexpectedly gentle, methodical. The thick bandage he applied felt alien against her skin, a forced, uncomfortable moment of vulnerability. He returned to the scanner, studying the complex readouts, the numbers, the graphs, the faint biological energy signature. They all pointed to a deeper systemic issue beyond mere physical trauma. The silver patterns dimming directly correlated to a precipitous drop in Lyra's core life energy. It was a phenomenon utterly unknown in human biology. "The patterns," Michael stated, turning to Vestra, his voice low. "What do they mean? And this fading energy, what is it?" Vestra's expression darkened further, her eyes narrowing. She pulled her arm back, rubbing the bandaged spot. "It is a private matter. Our biology is not for your species to dissect." Her evasive answer only deepened the mystery, adding another layer to the already oppressive tension. Outside, the dust storm howled, a relentless, corrosive beast trapping them within the small habitat. The confined space, the language barrier, Lyra's worsening, inexplicable condition, and Vestra's palpable, unyielding mistrust created an almost unbearable pressure. Michael, ignoring the silence, moved with practiced efficiency. He checked the habitat's storm defenses, confirming the energy shields were holding against the gale. Then he began preparing basic, nutrient-rich rations, a methodical routine that was a testament to his solitary existence. He offered one to Vestra. She eyed it, then him, before reluctantly taking it. While Vestra ate, still watching him with suspicion, Michael continued to discreetly observe the alien sisters. He cataloged every detail of their unique physiology, the faint iridescence of their skin, the delicate structure of their hands, the subtle flickers of their silver patterns, always the silver patterns. His analytical, engineering mind was already building a database of alien biology. Lyra's vital signs, though still critical, showed a fractional improvement thanks to his immediate intervention. A glimmer of hope, quickly overshadowed by a new terrifying fear. The flickering patterns on her skin, despite the temporary stabilization, continued to dim. His jury-rigged solutions were only delaying an unknown, deeper biological collapse. Michael settled back into his console, monitoring Lyra's vitals, the habitat systems, and the relentless storm outside. The immediate crisis was averted, but the silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions and the looming threat of Lyra's mysterious, degenerative decline. Michael's gaze remained fixed on the console, the holographic display of Lyra's internal systems swirling before him in cool blues and greens. His brow furrowed, a deep crease forming between his eyes as he watched the unique biological energy signature. It was a faint, almost shimmering line, and it continued its slow, puzzling decay, a relentless downward drift, despite the fact that her standard vital signs, heart rate, respiration, core temperature, held steady. The incongruity was a cold knot in his gut. How could she be stable, yet simultaneously unraveling? Across the small infirmary bay, Vestra stood guard. Her posture, even while seated on the edge of a supply crate, radiated suspicion. Her pale lavender skin, usually alive with faint silver patterns, seemed muted in the habitat's artificial light. Her amber eyes, sharp and unblinking, tracked Michael's every movement, then flicked to the unfamiliar human technology humming softly around them. A hand rested almost casually on the hilt of a concealed blade he knew she carried. Michael cleared his throat, pushing away from the console. He held up open palms, then pointed to himself, then to Lyra's cot, then to the medkit. "Help," he enunciated slowly, using the Alliance universal word, then added, "Water." He pointed to the purifier. Vestra responded with a string of guttural Prilorian words, a harsh, clipped cadence that deepened the chasm between them. Her meaning was clear. Stay away. Don't touch. The profound communication gap felt like another wall in this already suffocating environment. With a sigh, Michael retreated to his workbench, his frustration a low thrum beneath his skin. He rummaged through his comms kit, pulling out a general-purpose Alliance Universal Translator. It was a standard device, a palm-sized black rectangle, but notoriously imperfect with newly encountered alien languages. He powered it on, a flicker of desperate hope igniting within him. He offered it to Vestra. She took it, her fingers long and slender, but her movements stiff. "Cathar," she rasped, the Prelorian word harsh, her eyes narrowing as she spoke into the device. The translator word then sputtered out a garbled, nonsensical phrase. "Crushing, syndicate, question?" Michael shook his head, a wave of defeat washing over him. Vestra glared at the device, then at him, uttering another sharp Prelorian curse, tossing the translator back onto the workbench. It clattered against a pile of tools. Ignoring the flawed device, Michael powered up a datapad. He pulled up a blank screen and began to draw. A crude stick figure of himself, then one of Lyra, adding a simple heart to represent health. He pointed to the water purifier, then sketched a stylized droplet. He pointed to a nutrient paste ration, then drew a rectangle. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to build a rudimentary shared vocabulary, his movements deliberate and patient. Vestra watched, silent. As Michael drew a simple sun and pointed toward the habitat's viewport, a flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. Her initial suspicion, a constant heavy presence in the room, seemed to yield, if only by a fraction, to a guarded intrigue. Her head tilted, a subtle shift. But the fragile truce was shattered as Lyra stirred, a soft, pain-filled whimper escaping her lips. Michael's attention snapped back to her. Her faint silver patterns, which had stabilized after the initial treatment, now dimmed even further, becoming barely perceptible against her violet skin. Her breathing grew shallower, a fragile whisper in the quiet bay, indicating a terrifying worsening of her underlying condition. Michael intensified his research, fingers flying across the console. He cross-referenced Lyra's unique biological readings with every xenobiology database his limited system possessed. He searched for patterns, for anomalies, for anything that matched the slow, inexplicable decay of her energy signature. Nothing. No matches for the fading life force, no known biological affliction. It was as if she was simply losing herself. He pushed away from the console again, moving with renewed purpose. He meticulously checked the habitat's life support systems, ensuring the atmospheric processors hummed at optimal efficiency, cycling the recycled air. He verified the power cells, their green indicators glowing steadily, but he knew they were finite. The corrosive dust storm outside still raged, a relentless, grinding roar against the reinforced walls, showing no signs of abating. Their continued survival depended on the integrity of this enclosed space. A choked sound escaped Vestra's throat. She knelt beside Lyra's cot, her hand hovering protectively over her sister's chest. Her shoulders slumped, and she uttered a specific Prilorian phrase, thick with profound sorrow, her voice breaking. The struggling translator on Michael's workbench crackled, then rendered a partial, haunting phrase, life essence. Bond. Michael processed the garbled translation, his analytical mind racing. He looked from Vestra's grief-stricken face to Lyra's dimming patterns. Life essence. Bond. The words clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. This was more than just physical injury. Lyra's condition wasn't just a wound. It was a critical loss of some unique biological or spiritual life essence, a connection perhaps tied to her species' very being. Vestra, sensing Michael's focused attention on Lyra's failing patterns, abruptly stood, her eyes flashing. She demanded his attention with a harsh Prelorian word, the tone leaving no doubt. It was a challenge, a fierce reassertion of her authority, a question of his continued presence or his futile methods. Michael met her gaze unflinching, his eyebrows furrowed, his posture unwavering. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, but his body language communicated an unshakable purpose. He would not abandon Lyra. He would not abandon them. His presence silently reinforced his role, not just as a medic, but as a protector, a healer in this desolate, storm-battered sanctuary. The habitat shuddered violently then, a deep, resonant groan echoing through the metal structure as the dust storm's intensity peaked. Lights flickered, momentarily plunging the infirmary into deep shadow before snapping back to full power. For a fleeting second, raw fear crossed Vestra's face, a stark, alien vulnerability he hadn't seen before. Her gaze instinctively darted to Michael, a subtle, shared acknowledgement of the peril pressing in on them from all sides. As Lyra's life force wavered precariously, a faint, almost imperceptible psionic ripple emanated from her. It was a ghostly touch, a brush against the edges of Michael's consciousness, and his adapted geological scanner, still monitoring Lyra's unique biosignature, briefly registered it. An unusual neural activity spike, a flare of unexpected energy pulsed on the screen, then faded, leaving only the relentless, downward decay. Michael reviewed the scanner data from the ripple, the fleeting burst of unknown energy, coupled with Lyra's continued, terrifying decline. His current solutions were failing. He saw it now, with chilling clarity. They were rapidly running out of time to save her from this unknown biological affliction, whatever it truly was. He looked at Lyra's fading form, her breath a ghost against the air. Then he looked at Vestra, who met his gaze with a desperate, unspoken plea, her fierce pride finally broken by grief and fear. The look solidified a mutual understanding. A more profound intervention was required, though neither of them knew what it could possibly be. Lyra's biological energy signature, once a vibrant lavender on Michael's scanner, now flickered like a dying ember. The gentle hum of the medical bay suddenly felt oppressive, each beat of Michael's heart mirroring the frantic pace of the diminishing life force displayed before him. Her silver skin patterns, so intricate and alive, had dimmed to barely perceptible traces, struggling against the encroaching pallor of her flesh. Michael moved with a desperate efficiency, his hands trembling only slightly as he cycled through his limited medical supplies. He injected a powerful Alliance nutrient solution, then a broad-spectrum antitoxin, but the readouts on Lyra's portable diagnostic panel remained stubbornly stagnant. Her alien biology, fighting an unknown enemy from within, seemed to reject every human intervention. The mysterious energy drain continued unabated, a slow, terrifying unraveling. A guttural sound of frustration escaped Michael. He spun away from the bed, his gaze sweeping the habitat for anything else. His eyes landed on his terraforming unit, a hulking piece of Alliance tech designed for shaping worlds, not saving lives. Desperation sharpened his focus. He tore into the unit, stripping a high-efficiency atmospheric regulator, its intricate filters designed for refining toxic gases. Next, he unmounted a focused UV spectrum emitter, meant for stimulating nascent flora in nascent biomes. Wires sparked, tools whined, and the air filled with the sharp tang of ozone and heated metal as he jury-rigged a makeshift enclosure around Lyra's bed. He sealed the space with clear nutrient film sheeting, diverting power from his habitat's solar array directly to the cobbled-together components. Vestra, usually stoic, watched Michael's frantic modifications with a predatory intensity. Her posture was rigid, a silent sentinel of suspicion, yet a sliver of grudging acceptance bled into her gaze. Every unorthodox twist of his wrist, every spark from his hastily spliced wires, was met with unblinking scrutiny. Her instincts screamed caution, but the urgent, desperate need to save her sister silenced her protests. The reconfigured environment whirred to life, a fragile, sterile bubble around Lyra. Michael's diagnostic panel registered a minute improvement. Lyra's vitals stabilized, the erratic spikes softening into a more consistent rhythm. A breath hitched in Michael's chest, a fleeting wave of relief, but her skin patterns remained stubbornly dim, the ghostly silver barely visible beneath the nutrient film. The core issue, whatever it was, persisted, patiently waiting. As Michael meticulously recalibrated the atmospheric mix, a strange sensation washed over him, a faint, dreamlike impression, not quite a sound, not quite a thought, but a palpable wave of fear and urgency. It emanated from Lyra, a silent scream of distress that bypassed his ears and settled directly in his mind. He blinked, shaking his head, trying to dislodge the alien intrusion, but it clung to him, a faint echo. He recognized it then, a primal, nonverbal communication, a subtle whisper from the edge of consciousness. It connected somehow to that spike of neural activity he'd seen when he first treated her. He focused his own thoughts, picturing a calm, steady light, trying to project reassurance across the unseen barrier. "I'm here. You're safe." Building on his receptive presence, Lyra stirred. Her eyes, still closed, squeezed tighter, and a surge of her remaining energy erupted. This time, the psionic vision was clearer, fragmented but vivid, bypassing the language barrier entirely. Michael's mind reeled. He saw a dazzling, crystalline city, impossibly tall spires reaching for twin suns, teeming with beings of pale lavender and deep violet skin. Then chaos, flashes of plasma fire, the roar of military dropships, ornate royal guards falling, blood blooming like ink on polished floors. A blur of movement, Lyra and Vestra, younger, smaller, being dragged through a chaotic spaceport, soldiers with harsh, angular faces barking orders. A ship, sleek and fast, launching into the black. The downloaded memories settled, cold and heavy in Michael's mind. They weren't just crash victims. They were high-value fugitives, royalty perhaps, fleeing a violent coup. And Lyra, with her unique psionic abilities, was their quarry. The crash wasn't an accident. It was an assassination attempt. Outside, the dust storm reached a ferocious peak. The habitat groaned, buffeted by winds that shrieked like banshees. The main power flickered, plunging the interior into a dim, emergency red glow that bathed Lyra's pale face in an unsettling ruddiness. The hum of Michael's improvised life support system became a vulnerable whisper against the storm's fury. Vestra, witnessing Michael's stunned reaction to Lyra's silent revelation, felt the shift in his expression. She moved closer, her eyes scanning his, a silent question in her posture, a shared vulnerability that transcended their species. The storm howled around them, a physical manifestation of the danger that now felt terrifyingly clear. Michael, feeling a profound, aching connection to their shared plight, knew he had to offer something in return, a piece of himself. He needed her to trust him fully, now more than ever. "I was an engineer," he began, his voice rough over the storm's roar. "Terraforming, a project, alliance contract, corporate negligence. It killed my team." The words felt like sandpaper in his throat, a wound he hadn't touched in years. He described the catastrophic failure, the faulty atmospheric processors, the sudden, violent decompression that had ripped through the nascent colony. The faces of his team, still vivid in his nightmares. "My fault," he admitted, the guilt of familiar, heavy cloak. I should have seen it, should have stopped it. He looked at Vestra, his gaze raw. That's why I came here. To be alone. To never be responsible for anyone else again. Vestra listened intently. Her silver skin patterns, though still dim, seemed to pulse with the intensity of Michael's confession. The raw emotion resonated with her own crushing burdens of protecting Lyra, of carrying the weight of their species' survival. She understood. She took a deep breath, the harsh alien sounds of her language softened by urgency and the unspoken bond forming between them. She used rudimentary translated phrases, aided by emphatic gestures, pointing from Lyra to the fading patterns on her own skin, then making a gesture of a crown above Lyra's head. Royal, hunted, Cathar. Then a gesture of grasping, a hungry, possessive hunger, for her mind, for her power. The dust storm began to subside, the howling wind fading to a mournful sigh. But as the habitat settled, Michael's long-range sensors, still actively scanning the distant orbit, registered a faint but distinct warp signature appearing in the system. A cold dread seeped into his bones. His blood ran cold. The energy signature. He knew it. Cathar Syndicate. The same ruthless slavers and bioprospectors who haunted the fringe worlds. They were here. They had tracked Lyra to Xylo 7. Vestra watched Michael's grim expression as his eyes locked onto the blip on his scanner. Her body tensed, her warrior instincts flaring. She didn't need a translation. She intuitively grasped the new, imminent threat. She met Michael's gaze, her violet eyes locking with his in a silent challenge for their very survival. Michael's gaze locked onto the main screen, the Cathar vessel's warp signature flaring into stark, undeniable reality. It was rapidly closing, a predator's shadow stretching across the void, indicating their imminent arrival in Xylos 7's upper atmosphere within the hour. No more hiding, no more time. He slammed a fist onto the console, the quiet impact vibrating through the synth steel. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up his habitat's long-range sensor logs. The Cathar vessel's trajectory painted a grim picture. A calculated descent targeting the open plains south of his ridge. A landing zone strategically advantageous for deploying ground forces, offering minimal cover for defenders. They knew what they were doing. Vestra, standing a few paces behind him, didn't need the human's complex displays to understand. The tension in Michael's shoulders, the grim set of his jaw, the raw urgency in the air was all she needed. Her lavender skin, still pale from injury, seemed to take on a harder hue. She shifted, testing her weight, a primal tactical mindset seizing her. Her gaze swept the habitat's interior, assessing every junction, every conduit, every potential point of failure. "Your defenses, human," she grated, her voice tight with a newfound fierce demand. "What are they? What can you do?" A fierce, protective instinct surged through Michael, eclipsing the weariness that usually haunted him. He turned to her, a desperate plan already forming. "Everything," he said, his voice low, firm. "I can turn this place into a fortress. My terraforming equipment, it's going to be our weapon." He moved with a sudden, driving purpose, deploying automated excavation drones from their silent charging berths. Their multi-jointed arms whirred to life, photoreceptors glowing a dull orange. Michael's commands flew, rapid fire, across their internal processors. Reprogram, dig deep, perimeter, regolith berms hardened. Outside, the ground shuddered faintly as the drones began their work. Clawed treads tearing into the crimson dust, rapidly creating a protective ring around the habitat. Next, his attention snapped to the high-powered laser drills, usually reserved for slicing through dense mineral veins. He recalibrated their energy frequencies, adjusted their targeting protocols, and linked them to the habitat's main security grid. The heavy equipment, designed for extraction, now hummed with a new, deadly potential, their muzzles swiveling, focusing their beam intensity for anti-personnel use. They became automated defensive turrets. Finally, he strategically positioned the seismic resonators, typically used for geological surveys. He adapted their ground-penetrating pulses, turning them into tools of disruption. They would no longer seek subterranean anomalies but generate localized ground instability to trip advancing forces or emit disorienting sonic deterrents that would shatter an enemy's focus. Despite the throbbing ache in her side, Vestra didn't hesitate. She moved with Michael, a shadow of her former warrior self, but no less formidable. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the habitat's schematics as he worked. This conduit, she pointed to a glowing line on the display, can be rerouted to increase plasma shield output by 15% if we sacrifice life support in the auxiliary bay. Her military training, honed through countless drills and skirmishes, provided crucial tactical placement advice, her hands, though trembling slightly, helping to reroute internal habitat power for the new defensive systems. A true partnership was forming, forged in the crucible of impending battle. But even as they worked, a cold dread snaked through Michael. He glanced towards the medical bay, his internal monitors displaying Lyra's energy signature. It continued its slow, agonizing decline, a stark, red line on the console. Her intricate skin patterns, usually a vibrant violet, flickered with increased instability, a dying ember against her paling skin. Vestra felt it too, a subtle, insidious weakness beginning to unfurl within her own body, a growing coldness, a strange, profound exhaustion that had nothing to do with her wounds. It was a horrifying confirmation of the shared degenerative process, a mirror of Lyra's fading life. Her eyes hardened, her hand going instinctively to her chest, over her own flickering patterns. Overwhelmed by the stark reality of her sister's imminent death, and now her own, Vestra stumbled back from the console, her composure shattering. Tears, hot and alien, tracked paths down her lavender cheeks. She turned to Michael, her voice a raw, desperate whisper. "The fading," she choked out, the words ripped from her. "It's a genetic unraveling, human, an emotional decay, specific to my species. Trauma. It accelerates it." Her explanation spilled out, urgent and broken. "The only cure, the only stabilization, is the triarch bond. It's a sacred, permanent, symbiotic connection between three individuals. A life-binding marital union, Michael." Her gaze, shimmering with unshed tears, met his. "Both Lyra and I, we are beginning to fade. We will die without it." The admission hung heavy in the air, a desperate plea cloaked in ancient custom. Just as the weight of her revelation settled, an alarm shrieked. Michael's eyes snapped back to the main screen. A Cathar reconnaissance drone, small and sleek, descended through the atmosphere, its energy signature registering as it swept the wreckage of the sister ship, then began a wider, methodical search pattern directly towards the habitat. Michael didn't hesitate. He manually targeted the reconfigured laser drill, his finger hovering over the fire command. "Hold on," he muttered, his focus absolute. He squeezed the trigger. A concentrated beam of crimson light lanced across the night sky, a precise interception attempt. The highly maneuverable drone, however, was fast. It evaded the direct hit, a blur against the stars, but a glancing blow sent sparks showering from its chassis. It limped away, its energy signature still strong enough to transmit its findings back to the Cathar vessel. Michael and Vestra exchanged a grim, determined look. No words were needed. Their hidden position was compromised. The Cathar siege was about to begin. The heavy truth of the fading and the desperate, terrifying necessity of the triarch bond hung unspoken between them, a profound choice looming amidst the escalating external threat. Michael's long-range sensors shrieked, a cacophony of overlapping alerts as multiple Cathar dropships initiated atmospheric re-entry. Their heat signatures blazed across his console, an approaching swarm, their landing vectors painting a deadly geometry around the habitat. This wasn't a probing attack. It was a full assault. His fingers flew across the control panel, a blur of practiced motion. Remote commands shot through the habitat's network, activating the external defense grid. The repurposed laser drills, once meant to carve tunnels for geothermal vents, swiveled on their reinforced mounts, targeting locks snapping onto the descending craft. A low thrum vibrated through the habitat floor as they powered up, ready to engage. Vestra, already at the reinforced observation port, pressed her face against the thick durasteel. "East flank! 3 heavy transports," she barked, her voice tight with urgency. "Deploying ground forces now." 2 smaller craft breaking for the western perimeter, they're fast. Her lavender skin, usually so vibrant, seemed muted under the habitat's emergency lighting, but her eyes, sharp and unblinking, missed nothing. The first wave of Cathar ground forces hit like a physical punch. Explosions rocked the habitat as concentrated plasma fire slammed into Michael's defensive berms, pulverizing the compacted regolith. Automated laser turrets spat brilliant scarlet beams in return, vaporizing Cathar troopers in flashes of superheated air. But their numbers were overwhelming. A smaller Cathar dropship, cunningly attempting a rapid descent into a blind spot Michael had always worried about, suddenly veered. He pounded his fist onto a single unmarked console button. A deep, guttural rumble tore through the ground beneath them, followed by a violent shudder. The dropship's descent turned into a plummet as the moon's surface buckled, a hidden seismic resonator creating a localized sinkhole. The craft vanished in a plume of dust and wreckage, its final explosion echoing like a distant thunderclap. Michael ignored the brief triumph, his gaze locked on the main perimeter feed. A Cathar heavy weapon emplacement was systematically tearing apart a section of his laser turrets. With grim precision, he remotely fine-tuned a laser drill's targeting system, focusing its beam. The drill hummed, then screamed, spitting a coherent beam of pure energy that lanced out, striking the emplacement. Metal shrieked, twisted, and then dissolved, the weapon a molten slag heap. "Their eastern flank is bunching up near the old comms tower," Vestra called out, her voice a low growl. "A prime target for a staggered pulse." Michael didn't hesitate. "Understood." His fingers danced, activating a series of staggered seismic pulses. The ground trembled, not violently enough to collapse structures, but enough to send Cathar ground forces stumbling, disrupting their coordinated advance. It bought them precious seconds, but the Cathar were relentless. Specialized breaching units, their heavy plasma cutters glowing with malevolent intent, began to penetrate the outer layers of the habitat's reinforced walls. Sizzling and scraping sounds vibrated through the bulkheads, growing louder, closer. A searing, blinding flash erupted near Vestra. A plasma bolt from a breaching unit had scorched the viewport, momentarily compromising the habitat's atmosphere. A chilling hiss of escaping air filled the control room, and Vestra, knocked backward by the impact, scrambled for cover, her hand instinctively going to her throat as the pressure dropped. Seeing her immediate danger, a primal surge of protective fury ripped through Michael. He bypassed all automated protocols, his hands flying to a manual override. With a guttural roar, he fired a high-power terraforming plasma torch, its beam a concentrated lance of incandescent energy. It tore through the outer wall and incinerated the breaching unit, threatening Vestra. A high-pitched shriek of disintegrating metal echoing even over the battle. An acrid smell filled the air, quickly purged by the habitat's emergency atmospheric processors. Vestra looked up, her lavender eyes locking onto Michael's. In that brief, intense gaze, a silent acknowledgement passed between them of his protective action, of her vulnerability, and a profound, wordless shift in the foundations of her trust. A glance at the medical bay display sent a fresh spear of dread through Michael. Lyra's vital signs plummeted further, her luminescent skin patterns fading to a barely perceptible flicker. The extreme biological distress was unmistakable. Vestra, still recovering from the plasma bolt's near miss, swayed. A sudden, debilitating wave of nausea and extreme fatigue washed over her, forcing her to brace against the console. The accelerating progression of the fading within her own body was undeniable, a cold, creeping horror. Outside, the Cathar deployed a new threat, a large shielded energy field generator. It shimmered into existence, its hum subtly dimming the habitat's internal lights as it began to neutralize Michael's automated defenses and attempt to isolate the habitat from its external power grid. Michael's mind raced. He understood the generator's function, its vulnerability. Rerouting emergency power, he overloaded a nearby rock melter, turning it into a directed thermal pulse cannon. With a violent surge of energy, a blast of focused heat erupted from the melter's maw, slamming into the Cathar's energy field. The shimmering barrier flickered, then collapsed, sputtering into nothingness. Disoriented by the unexpected countermeasure and the loss of their energy field, the Cathar forces temporarily withdrew, their leaders barking orders to consolidate their position and reassess. A tense quiet descended, broken only by the distant crackle of dying fires. Vestra collapsed fully, leaning heavily against a console, her remaining strength failing her. Her gaze, raw and desperate, found Michael's once more, a silent plea in her eyes that transcended words. Michael surveyed the temporary lull in combat, his eyes sweeping from the ravaged perimeter to the weakening sisters. The weight of the Triarch bond, once a terrifying prospect, was now an inescapable imperative. There was no other choice. Michael cursed, the word a rasp in his throat as he lunged for the medical bay's viewport, the Cathar ship a growing, predatory shadow against Silo 7's crimson horizon. But the external threat dissolved an instant later, replaced by the far more urgent horror unfolding within his own sanctuary. Lyra's breath was a shallow, rattling gasp, her deeper violet skin now a sickly, muted gray. The intricate silver patterns across her temples and throat barely a whisper of light. Beside her, Vestra, who had just delivered her desperate plea, sagged against the cot's frame, her own pale lavender hue losing its vibrancy, the usually fierce silver markings on her warrior's arm flickering like dying embers. He was beside them in two long strides, his hands flying to Lyra's wrist, then Vestra's. Their pulses were thready, barely there. The medical scanner Michael slapped onto Lyra's chest shrieked a warning, displaying catastrophic system failures. The fading, he realized, was no longer a threat looming on the horizon. It was here now, extinguishing their life force with horrifying speed. Vestra somehow found a last desperate spark. Her organic hand, cold and trembling, closed around Michael's, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes, usually pools of defiant amber, were wide with a raw, pleading vulnerability. The fading, it takes everything, she whispered, her voice a brittle echo. The Triarch bond, it is the only way. A joining of three souls. Complete, permanent. She struggled for breath, her gaze darting to her sister. It is our life, our marriage, to save us both. Michael's mind reeled. Marriage, an irrevocable, triple commitment. His thoughts flashed to the ruined terraforming colony, the faces of his lost team, the crushing weight of responsibility that had driven him to this desolate rock. He'd failed them. He couldn't fail again, couldn't take on a burden so profound. Not this absolute species-defining life or death bond. Then a feather-light touch brushed his other hand. Lyra, her eyes barely slits of violet, lifted a trembling finger, seeking his skin. A faint psionic pulse, fragile as a spider silk thread, brushed against his awareness. A whisper of desperate hope, a fragile plea for trust, a pure, innocent faith in him that tore through his reservations like a laser. He saw the dimming light on her skin, felt the coldness radiating from her, and knew with bone-deep certainty that hesitation meant death. Not just for them, but for the last vestiges of his own humanity. He stared into Vestra's pleading eyes, then at Lyra's fading form. No, he wouldn't let them die, not when he could do something. He would be their protector. He would be their bonded. Tell me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. What do I do? Vestra's face, even as the life drained from it, softened with a flicker of gratitude. Her grip tightened once more, guiding his hand, positioning it over Lyra's. Join your hands and with ours, a circle of life. Intention is all. I accept you, Michael Reyes, as my bonded. My life is yours. She gasped, then turned her gaze to Lyra. I accept you, Lyra, as my bonded. My life is yours. Michael took a steadying breath, the Cathar threat momentarily forgotten, eclipsed by the terrifying intimacy of this moment. He placed his left hand over Lyra's, his right entwined with Vestra's, creating the triangle. He looked at Lyra, then Vestra, their faces etched with fading beauty, and spoke the words, a solemn vow in the quiet medical bay. I accept you, Vestra, as my bonded. My life is yours. Then to Lyra, his voice thick. I accept you, Lyra, as my bonded. My life is yours. As the last word left his lips, a surge of warmth, impossibly potent, flooded through him, originating from their joined hands and rushing through his entire being. It wasn't just physical, it was an overwhelming influx of feeling. Lyra's gentle hope, vibrant and pure, washed over him, followed by Vestra's fierce, unyielding protectiveness, a powerful current of loyalty. And through it all, a profound, undeniable sense of belonging, a feeling he hadn't known in years, settled deep within his core. The silver patterns on both sisters' skin flared with blinding, renewed brilliance, pulsing with a steady inner light. Michael watched, transfixed, as the medical scanner's urgent warnings vanished, replaced by stable, strong vital signs. The fading had been arrested. He felt it, a profound physiological shift within them, a return to vibrant life that resonated within his own body. Then a new sensation, a subtle, yet acute awareness of their presences in his mind. Not words, not full thoughts, but a nascent connection that linked their perceptions, their emotional states, their very being. He felt the echo of Lyra's relief, the thrum of Vestra's revitalized strength. A part of him was now inextricably linked to them, a silent hum of connection underlying his own consciousness. A temporary calm, fragile but profound, settled over the habitat. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and alien biology, vibrated with the quiet awe of their newly forged connection, the impossible shift in their shared reality. Michael stared at the sisters, now breathing steadily, their skin glowing. He was no longer just a rescuer. He was something more. The moment shattered. Michael's external sensors shrieked, a piercing, insistent alarm that tore through the fragile peace. A new Cathar assault, coordinated, reinforced siege units, the readout showed, bypassing Michael's layered defenses with chilling efficiency. They weren't probing this time. They were coming in. They're targeting the primary power conduit, Michael growled, his voice low, the engineer in him instantly assessing the threat. They're attempting a full-scale breach. Here, Vestra, now fully revitalized, was already on her feet. Her pale lavender skin now glowed with an inner fire, her silver patterns blazing. She moved with a fluid, lethal grace Michael hadn't seen since their first confrontation, no longer weakened, but a warrior reborn. An unspoken strategy, sharp and precise, was already forming in her mind, a plan Michael could almost feel at the edges of his own thoughts. Lyra, though still weak from her ordeal, lifted her head. A clear mental image, sharp and detailed, slammed into Michael's mind. Cathar troop placements, weak points in their armor, flanking maneuvers. It was instantaneous, complete, and utterly devastating intel, a direct benefit of their newly forged bond. Choke point, Vestra! The access tunnel, Sector 7, Michael barked, processing Lyra's psionic intel instantly, his mind racing. He was already rerouting power, diverting every available joule to the heavy plasma cannon mounted above the habitat's main entrance. I'll cover the main breach. The trio moved as one, an unprecedented synchronization guiding their actions. No words were needed, only the silent, burning certainty of their shared purpose. Michael felt Vestra's surge of adrenaline as she pivoted, Lyra's focused intent as she fed him more tactical data. Together, they prepared to defend their newfound family, a single indomitable unit against the renewed Cathar attack. The heavy plasma cannon hummed, a deep thrumming vibration that resonated through the habitat's reinforced floor, a low, guttural growl of coiled power. Michael moved with practiced economy, his hands flying across the ancient console, rerouting energy, charging the weapon. Beside the main airlock, Vestra stood, a silhouette of fierce readiness. Her plasma blade, a crackling line of blue energy, was already active, casting a faint dancing light across the hardened lines of her face. This was their choke point, the narrow maw through which the Cathar would try to swallow them whole. Lyra's presence pulsed in Michael's mind, sharper, clearer than before. Her psionic sight, now amplified by the triarch bond, painted a vivid three-dimensional overlay onto his spatial awareness. He saw them intricate Cathar movement patterns swarming across the lunar surface, pinpointing weak points in their armored siege units, streaming real-time intel directly into his and Vestra's thoughts. It was like seeing with 100 eyes, knowing with an instinct beyond his own. Lead unit, center mass, 2 degrees right. Lyra's thought whisper surged through him, precise as a laser. Michael fired. The plasma cannon roared, a blinding spear of superheated energy that tore through the thin atmosphere. It impacted the lead Cathar breach unit with catastrophic force, incinerating its advanced armor into slag and vapor in a single violent flash. Simultaneously, Vestra was a blur of motion. Lyra's warning had come just before Michael's shot, an anticipatory ripple through their shared consciousness. Vestra had already moved, engaging a flanking team that tried to capitalize on the main unit's push. Her plasma blade a deadly blue arc, cutting down multiple targets with impossibly fast coordinated movements. The remaining Cathar forces, reeling from the sudden, devastating resistance, didn't hesitate for long. A new signature bloomed on Lyra's psionic overlay specialized disruptor fields. They popped into existence around the Cathar, shimmering domes of distorted energy that immediately began to jam Michael's external systems. The familiar hum of the bond dulled, Lyra's vibrant intel turning hazy, Vestra's sharp edge feeling slightly muted in his mind. The connection wasn't severed, but it felt like trying to see through thick, greasy glass. Michael cursed under his breath, his hands already flying to a different console. He recognized the disruptor field's effect, the familiar static of energy suppression. He rerouted power, shunting vital reserves from auxiliary life support directly to the habitat's seismic resonators, terraforming tools repurposed for a far more violent function. With a guttural groan from deep within the moon's crust, localized ground tremors ripped through the Cathar formations, destabilizing their units, sending armored bodies stumbling, disrupting their coordinated advance. Vestra, sensing the momentary disorientation of her foes, capitalized on it with predatory grace. She moved through their ranks like a phantom, her plasma blade of focused intensity, cutting down multiple targets with brutal efficiency. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, only the pure, distilled essence of a warrior unleashed. A Cathar grenadier, spotting Vestra, armed a concussive charge. Lyra, through the still present but dulled bond, saw the arcing trajectory, the explosive impact that would surely tear Vestra apart. Panic flared, raw and untrained. A guttural cry ripped from Lyra's throat, and with it, a blinding emerald burst of pure psionic energy. It slammed into the incoming grenade, deflecting it violently into the lunar dust, where it detonated harmlessly. Lyra gasped, staring at her trembling hands, startled by the sheer force that she'd unconsciously unleashed. The habitat groaned around them, a wounded beast. The prolonged assault had taken its toll. Warning lights flashed across Michael's main screen, outer seals compromised, secondary power conduits sparking, air scrubbers struggling. Every impact, every near miss, chipped away at their dwindling power and life support resources. The very air began to feel thinner, recycled and strained. The constant influx of raw battle data, the Cathar's relentless aggression, the physical strain of combat, and the growing damage to their sanctuary created a palpable mental burden. It wasn't just Michael's weariness. It was shared, amplified through their nascent bond. He felt Vestra's rage, Lyra's fear, his own stubborn persistence, all swirling in a vortex of shared experience. Cornered, critically low on power, and with the Cathar regrouping for another push, Michael made a desperate, insane decision. He activated a prototype geothermal drill, not for mining, but for a final, catastrophic offensive. He targeted a cluster of Cathar units directly beneath them, sending the drill bit deep into the moon's volatile mantle. A low rumble vibrated through the habitat, growing louder, more unstable. Then, with a deafening roar, the lunar surface erupted, a localized, unstable magma vent spewing molten rock and superheated gases directly beneath the Cathar. The unexpected magma eruption, the shrieks of incinerated Cathar, and the heavy casualties forced a tactical, albeit temporary, retreat of the remaining ground forces. The battlefield was left scarred and scorched, molten rock cooling into obsidian rivers under the harsh Xylos 7 sun. The trio collapsed, and not in a heap, but sagging against consoles and walls, gasping, their muscles screaming in protest. But even through the physical exhaustion, the bond hummed with a powerful resonance, mutual accomplishment, profound relief, a quiet, almost reverent solidification of their connection, forged not just in battle, but in the shared certainty of survival. Michael pushed himself up, his limbs heavy, and quickly surveyed the habitat. The screens confirmed his fear. Critical systems compromised, air scrubbers failing, the outer hull riddled with multiple breaches. This fortress, their sanctuary, was now a death trap, increasingly untenable for sustained survival. His long-range sensors suddenly flared, picking up the Cathar ship repositioning in orbit. It wasn't retreating, it was settling into a precise, high-altitude trajectory, its energy signatures building. Orbital bombardment. Their intent was clear: eradicate the habitat completely, scour the surface clean, rather than risk another ground assault. Vestra saw the same data, understood the Cathar's new tactic with chilling clarity. "They will destroy the facility from orbit," she stated, her voice hoarse, the words ringing with grim finality. "There is no defense against that here." Lyra, her eyes distant, focused through the bond. Michael felt the cold persistence of the Cathar captain, a specific plan forming in his alien mind, a specialized atmospheric weapon, designed not for precision, but to scour the surface, to sterilize the very ground. She confirmed their dire intent, the truth a bitter taste in Michael's mouth. Faced with imminent orbital annihilation, Michael began to formulate a plan. It was insane, high risk, a desperate gamble. Escaping the compromised habitat, utilizing his heavily modified terraforming vehicle, the Mole, for deep subsurface travel. It was their only chance. Despite the overwhelming odds, the sisters looked at him, their eyes reflecting a fierce purpose. Within their newfound bond, their mental presence was a solid wall of trust, a unified commitment that mirrored his own. Michael's hands blurred, a whirlwind of focused precision. Sparks showered from the plasma torch as he welded additional titanium alloy, plating onto the Mole's already formidable hull, reinforcing critical pressure points. Life support conduits, usually routed for superficial atmospheric processing, were shunted and secured, redesigned for the crushing weight of kilometers of rock. His terraforming multi-tool hummed a constant counterpoint to the distant, ominous thrum of the Cathar command ship overhead, a sound that vibrated through the very bedrock. Every rerouted circuit, every slammed rivet, was a desperate prayer against the clock. Then the first concussive blast hit. The habitat shuddered, groaning like a dying beast. Alarms shrieked a deafening cacophony. Energy blasts from orbit began to hammer the compound, each impact a physical blow that sent Michael reeling. Yet he held his ground, his gaze fixed on the Mole's still open hatch. This was it. The Cathar had opened their bombardment, a chaotic but crucial window for their escape. "Now!" he yelled, his voice raw. Vestra, supporting Lyra, moved with astonishing speed despite her own injuries. They burst from the rapidly crumbling habitat, plasma fires sizzling past them like angry vipers. Debris, superheated and jagged, rained down, impacting the ground with explosive force. Michael shoved Lyra forward, Vestra's pale lavender form a blur as she shielded her sister. The Mole's hatch, a dark maw in the chaos, seemed impossibly far, yet they reached it, stumbling inside as the habitat behind them screamed its death throes. Michael slammed the hatch shut, the thick plasteel groaning as it locked into place. "Brace!" he roared, already at the controls. With a thunderous, grinding roar, the Mole's heavy-duty drills engaged, biting into the rock. The vehicle lurched violently, then plunged. Above them, the habitat suffered a catastrophic, final hit, imploding into a fiery, superheated ruin. the shock wave rattling the mole's reinforced frame even as they descended. They plummeted into the subterranean depths, Michael wrestling with the controls. The mole groaned, metal shrieking in protest as unstable geological strata and unexpected rock fissures buffeted the vehicle from all sides. He fought to keep them straight, his muscles burning, every lurch and tremor amplified through the bond to Vestra and Lyra, their shared fear a cold knot in his stomach, yet tempered by an unyielding perseverance. A sudden, eerie silence fell on the comms, the Cathar orbital bombardment ceasing. Michael's long-range geological scanner, however, picked up new, subtle signatures on the surface. Not more blasts, but something else. Something smaller. Several somethings moving fast, converging on the implosion site. A cold dread settled over him. They knew. They realized their targets had vanished and were deploying specialized ground teams to investigate the seismic signature of the mole's descent. Below, the conditions worsened. The mole's hull began to creak under immense pressure, a low, constant groan that spoke of the geological forces around them. Internal temperature spiked, air recyclers struggling against volatile pockets of superheated gases Lyra now sensed, making the very atmosphere thick with potential. Corrosive mineral veins shimmered on the external cameras, threatening structural integrity. The mole was designed for this, but not for this pace, this desperation. Left, Michael, a pocket of instability. Lyra's voice, amplified by the bond, was less a sound than a direct impulse in his mind, guiding his hands on the controls. A flash of rock density, a feeling of weakness, directed him away from a narrow fault line. Right, a fissure just ahead. Her psionic abilities, once a subtle hum, were now a crucial navigational system, mentally mapping the immediate geological environment, an intricate dance of intuition and bond-amplified sight. Beside him, Vestra moved with focused efficiency. Her hands flew across the auxiliary console, rerouting power to strained life support systems, monitoring internal pressure readings. A hiss of escaping air from a micro-fracture in the bulkhead had her slamming a patch plate into place with practiced grace, her gaze meeting Michael's for a fleeting second, a silent question of support, instantly answered by his grim nod. The mole's power core, a marvel of Alliance engineering, began to struggle, protesting the sustained drilling and life support demands in the increasingly harsh environment. Critical energy warnings flashed red across the main display, triggering a soft, insistent wail that pierced the cabin. Michael grit his teeth. Rationing. Everything, he muttered, his voice tight. The internal lights dimmed further, the drill's roar taking on a strained, gasping quality. Then the primary drill mechanism choked, seizing with a violent shudder that nearly tore the mole from its descent path. Michael didn't hesitate. He pulled on an environmental suit, the helmet's thrum of familiar comfort. Vestra, keep us as stable as you can, he ordered, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. He cycled the airlock, the hiss of its seals momentarily deafening. Exposed to the grinding rock and the terrifying proximity of the massive drill bit, he crawled into the shaft, sparks flying as he improvised. His versatile terraforming multi-tool hummed, repurposing a power conduit from a salvaged habitat component, welding a patch plate over a fractured servo. The sheer risk of being crushed, of the drill seizing again, was a cold weight. But through the bond, he felt Vestra's unwavering focus, Lyra's quiet confidence. A sudden, sharp thump against the hull jolted him back inside, followed by another. Scrabbling sounds scraped against the metal, alien and predatory. Creatures! Lyra's psionic alarm blared, a raw wave of primal fear. Outside! Michael checked the external cameras. Glowing eyes, too many to count, peered from the gloom, acidic tendrils attempting to melt through the plating. The mole shuddered under the assault of aggressive, bioluminescent subterranean fauna adapted to the extreme conditions. Michael's mind raced. He slammed the controls, reversing a drill, ramming it into a particularly large creature clinging to the hull. A wet shriek echoed, then silence. He activated the mole's sonic resonators in a focused, short-range burst, shattering the rock above a cluster of the creatures, creating a localized cascade of debris that sealed off that tunnel section. The roar and shriek of the unseen fauna faded for now. a temporary reprieve. The mole finally broke through, no longer grinding through solid rock, but plunging into open air. The drills spun freely, the sudden give in the rock sending them lurching. They came to a jarring halt, suspended by magnetic clamps. Before them lay a vast, ancient cavern, dimly lit by distant geothermal vents. It offered temporary respite, but also revealed an unexpected, eerily still subterranean lake. Its surface, like black glass, reflected the faint, glowing light, its depth unknown, its composition a complete mystery. Then Michael's long-range subsurface sensors blipped, then another, and another, cathar, their distinct signature. Advanced, deep-penetrating sonic probes, designed specifically for subterranean tracking, were rapidly converging on their location. His gut clenched. "They're here," he stated, his voice flat. "Sonic probes. Fast." He ran simulations, grim calculations flashing across his internal display. The mole designed for excavation was too slow, too large. It couldn't outrun or effectively evade these specialized cathar tracking probes indefinitely within this cavern system. There was no escape in simply digging further. Michael's eyes fixed on the mysterious subterranean lake, its dark surface hinting at unknown depths. An audacious and incredibly risky plan began to formulate in his mind. His only potential, albeit desperate, means of escape. It was insane. It was the only way. A powerful, almost physical surge pulsed through the bond. Not words, but pure, unwavering confidence. "We are with you, Michael, always." Vestra's hand settled on his shoulder, firm, an anchor. Lyra's gaze met his, steady and bright, an unyielding wave of trust and unified commitment, reaffirming their commitment to his leadership. Michael's fingers flew across the mole's console, the geological scanners pulsing with a low, rhythmic hum that was both a comfort and a stark reminder of their peril. His gaze darted between holographic readouts, rapidly dissecting the subterranean lake's complex energy signatures and chemical composition. The data perseveranced into patterns unlike anything he'd ever cataloged, a highly unusual, non-Newtonian fluid with properties that defied conventional hydrodynamics. He zoomed in on the cavern walls, overlaying spectral analyses onto the topographical map. There, nestled within the ancient rock, were specific mineral deposits. If agitated with the right frequency, they wouldn't just dissolve. They would dramatically alter the lake's sonic properties, making it sonically opaque. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but the readings were undeniable. Above them, the cathar sonic probes broadcast their increasingly detailed scans of the cavern. Each ping was a sharp, intrusive thrum against the mole's hull. A vibration felt deep in Michael's teeth. On the tactical display, the mole's thermal and metallic signature glowed with growing clarity, a bright, damning blip against the rock. Michael turned to Vestra and Lyra, his face grim but resolute. "We're going in," he stated, his voice even despite the rising tension. "Submerge the mole into the lake. I'll use the seismic resonators to trigger a precise, controlled dissolution of those mineral veins." He pointed to the glowing deposits on the screen. "It should create a transient, sonically opaque cloud. Mask our presence from their probes." Vestra's silver patterns flared faintly. "Submerge?" she challenged, her voice tight with concern. "You don't know what this liquid will do to the hull or the life support. The composition is unknown, Michael." Her eyes, usually so fierce, held a flicker of genuine fear. Lyra, nestled beside Vestra, pressed a hand to Michael's arm. Through the bond, a profound sense of foreboding rippled through him. The lake, she communicated, held a latent, unpredictable energy. It felt ancient, volatile. Her warning was a chill that wrapped around his heart. Michael met their gazes, acknowledging their fears with a firm nod. "They're triangulating our position. We've got minutes, not hours. There are no other options, not if we want to live through this." His voice carried the weight of their desperate situation. With intense, singular focus, Michael spun back to the console. His hands flew over the controls, reconfiguring the mole's seismic resonators. Calibration bars flashed, frequencies shifted, and a high-pitched whine built in the vehicle's core as he interfaced them, with the unique vibrational patterns required for the mineral dispersion. Vestra, her features set in a grim line, moved with practiced efficiency. She checked the emergency hull patches, ensuring their sealant was primed, then systematically cycled through the oxygen recyclers, her movements betraying a reluctant acceptance of the imminent dangers. It was a silent testament to her trust, a fierce protective act born of necessity. Lyra, eyes closed, concentrated. Her silver patterns pulsed with a soft, steady light, amplifying her psionic senses. Around the mole's interior, Michael felt a subtle pressure, a dampening field forming, a psychic shield Lyra wove to mitigate any potential energetic backlash from the lake. The Cathar probes were no longer just pinging. They were actively triangulating, their sonic pulses becoming a constant, oppressive thrum that vibrated through the very bedrock. The air within the mole seemed to thicken with the sound, a heavy blanket of impending discovery. Michael pushed the forward thrusters. The mole lurched, its engines humming a deeper, more urgent tune, as he piloted the vehicle toward the center of the subterranean lake. The eerie silence of the cavern, once broken only by their quiet breaths, was now dominated by the mole's mechanical thrum and the relentless, invasive pings of their pursuers. A shudder ran through the mole's hull as it made contact with the non-Newtonian liquid. A strange, viscous resistance pushed back against the vehicle, the fluid clinging and pulling at the metal as it began its slow, deliberate descent. The lake's surface, reacting to the disturbance, shimmered with unearthly colors, unexpected bioluminescent flashes, blooming and fading like ephemeral stars. Now, Michael breathed, activating the modified seismic resonators. A deep, resonant thrum filled the cabin, vibrating through the floor and up through their seats. Precise, focused vibrations pulsed out into the lake, targeting the critical mineral veins he'd identified. The lake around the mole began to roil and churn, a violent, organic reaction to the resonant frequencies. Rapidly, it transformed into a dense, opaque cloud of shifting, sonically disruptive material, effectively engulfing the vehicle. Outside, all light was swallowed by the churning darkness. Simultaneously, the Cathar sonic pings from above abruptly became distorted and chaotic on the mole's external sensors. Their tracking had been severely compromised, a sudden, garbled mess that spoke of confusion, but also hinted at their impending aggression. Within the mole, the energy fluctuations from the lake's violent reaction created minor system glitches. Lights flickered, a soft warning chime chimed once, and a disorienting sensory feedback rippled through Michael and the sisters, a subtle pressure against their minds. Then a final Cathar ping, sharper than the others, broke through the distortion before being swallowed completely. It was a data burst, an image resolving for a fraction of a second on Michael's screen. A large Cathar ground team, heavily armed, had arrived at the cavern entrance. They were preparing to breach the chamber. The mole's internal systems hummed a low, steady note, Michael's fingers having danced across the console to override the last of the glitches. The exotic liquid outside still pressed in, a constant, rhythmic thrumming against the hull, vibrating through the deck plates and up through Michael's boots. It was a primordial beat, the pulse of a world that refused to be silent. Inside the submersible, the light was a distorted, murky green, bending the shadows into strange, elongated forms. Sounds from outside were muffled, warped by the dense liquid, forcing Michael and Vestra to rely on the mole's internal readouts, and, more critically, Lyra's bond-amplified senses. Lyra, nestled weakly in the medical berth, projected a complex wash of impressions through their connection. Her psionic senses were both strangely amplified and terrifyingly muffled. The lake's unique properties created a disorienting, insightful barrier, a paradox of clarity and obscuration. She could feel more, yet understand less. A low, insistent ping echoed through the mole's cockpit. Michael's eyes snapped to the external sensor display. Several heavy energy signatures, unmistakable for Cathar excavation equipment, materialized at the cavern entrance. The rhythmic grinding, faint but growing, confirmed it. They were deploying their ground team, an imminent physical breach. Michael's face hardened. His gaze swept over the cavern schematics displayed on the main screen, a flicker of his terraforming engineer's mind already calculating, devising. The mole's modified drilling arm, usually for boring precise mineral samples, could be repurposed. He'd use it to strategically collapse sections of the cavern ceiling directly above the Cathar breach point. Buy them time. Structural weaknesses, Vestra's thought, sharp and clear despite her fading strength, sliced through the bond. Her mental image showed precise fissures, ancient fault lines in the cavern rock, optimal points Michael hadn't immediately considered. Target here, and here. Timed impact for maximum cascade. Even weakened, her tactical brilliance was undeniable. As they worked, the silver patterns on Vestra's pale lavender skin began to flicker, dimming then flaring with an alarming irregularity. Lyra's deeper violet patterns mirrored it, her movements in the birth becoming sluggish, her breathing shallow. The fading was accelerating. Michael's stomach clenched. A cold wave of protective desperation washed over him, fueling his grit. He had to end this. Now. A guttural roar reverberated through the water, followed by a violent shudder that rocked the mole. The Cathar ground team had breached the cavern entrance. The heavy drilling equipment hammered against rock, the sounds echoing through the chamber, causing the dark water above them to ripple violently. Michael gripped the controls, his movements precise, almost surgical. The mole's drilling arm extended, a thick, articulated limb terminating in a high-frequency resonator. He guided it, targeting the weak points Vestra had indicated. With a surge of power, the resonator fired. The cavern ceiling groaned, then violently tore apart. Sections of rock, heavy and jagged, ripped free, plummeting onto the Cathar breach point. A localized rock slide erupted, a thunderous crump that sent shockwaves through the water. Muffled alien shrieks pierced the liquid's distortion, followed by a sickening silence. The breach was choked with rubble, a temporary, chaotic grave. But the silence didn't last. A furious, guttural cry, amplified by Cathar comms, tore through the water. The surviving Cathar, enraged, reconfigured their heavy equipment. The grinding intensified, shifting to a deeper, more ominous frequency. They weren't breaching anymore. They were systematically destabilizing the entire cavern structure. A full collapse was imminent. Then Lyra's fear exploded through the bond. A sudden, overwhelming vision. The entire cavern imploding, dust and rock swallowing them whole. It was a visceral, terrifying projection, confirming the Cathar's destructive intentions. They meant to bury them alive. Michael's mind raced. Their current position was untenable. He brought up subterranean network schematics, his fingers flying across the console, plotting a desperate escape route deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels. The cavern walls visibly groaned around them, fine cracks spiderwebbing across the rock face. Vestra, her silver patterns now barely visible, pushed herself upright, a surge of fading strength momentarily stiffening her stance. "I can generate a focused shield," she projected, her voice in Michael's mind strained. "Buy you critical seconds to bore." Her intent was self-sacrificial, a final, desperate act of defiance. Michael's rejection was instantaneous, a fierce surge of defiance through the bond. He wouldn't allow it. "No, too risky. I have another way." His gaze locked onto the mole's primary excavation laser, a tool meant for melting through kilometers of solid rock. It was a reckless maneuver, creating an immediate, unstable tunnel, but it was their only chance. With the cavern actively collapsing, groaning like a dying beast, Michael activated the mole's highest power settings. The main console flared to life, alarms blaring. The massive excavation laser, a controlled sunbeam, tore through the rock ahead, vaporizing it into superheated plasma and dust. The mole lurched forward, carving a new unstable path. Amidst the chaos, the bond flickered. Both Vestra and Lyra succumbed to the advanced stages of the fading. Their silver patterns dimmed almost entirely, their forms slumping, pushing them to the brink of unconsciousness. The bond, their lifeline, thinned to a fragile thread. Then with a violent, grinding lurch, the mole broke through. It twisted, scraping against newly exposed rock, narrowly avoiding being crushed by the final deafening collapse of the main cavern behind them. They were through, temporarily safe from the Cathar and the immediate implosion. but their escape had led them into an unknown, rapidly degrading tunnel system. And within the mole's confines, the sisters' life force was critically low, the bond barely holding. The mole groaned, a symphony of tortured metal and stressed composite, as the volatile new tunnel clawed at its structure. A shrill, stuttering klaxon joined the din, warning of critical hull integrity breaches. Across the primary display, new fissures spiderwebbed, glowing red against the rapidly degrading hull schematics. Michael wrestled with the controls, the joystick bucking in his grip, sparks showering from a ruptured conduit above. He was flying blind, the subterranean network collapsing around them, a tomb of rock grinding against the mole's already strained chassis. Lyra's psionic connection flickered erratically, a torrent of fragmented images assaulting Michael's mind. Not words, but raw sensation. The terrible pressure of crushing rock. Then a profound, chilling emptiness that felt like the void itself reaching for them. Her patterns, usually a vibrant violet, pulsed with chaotic, desperate energy before dimming to near invisibility. Vestra, slumped against the bulkhead, her pale lavender skin now a ghostly gray. The delicate silver patterns that usually traced her forearms all but vanished. Her breath caught, a ragged, shallow gasp that tore at Michael's gut. The fading was accelerating. Michael's instincts screamed. He ignored the blaring alarms, the falling debris, the desperate pleas of his own fear. His eyes darted across the diagnostic readouts, searching for anything, any anomaly in the chaotic rock density around them that suggested a stable pocket, a chamber, a momentary reprieve. His fingers danced over the geological scanner, rerouting power, amplifying its output. Then a flicker, a faint, rhythmic energy signature, subtle but undeniable, painted a tiny blip on the edge of his screen. It emanated from deeper within the rock, an ancient hidden geothermal chamber, a whisper of warmth in the cold, crushing darkness. With a roar that was half desperation, half prayer, Michael executed a desperate, high-risk maneuver. He poured every remaining ounce of thrust into the mole's forward engines, ignoring the screaming protests of failing systems. The vessel lurched, a sickening shudder as it rammed through a thin rock wall, tearing metal and grinding stone in a deafening cacophony. They burst through, not into open rock, but into a small, humid chamber. Glowing crystalline formations pulsed with soft orange light, casting dancing shadows across the damp walls. A warm vapor, smelling faintly of ozone and rich earth, kissed Michael's face, momentarily clearing the dust from his lungs. For a breath, the air seemed to hum with life, and he saw the barest, almost imperceptible tremor of Vestra's patterns, a faint resurgence that offered a sliver of hope. Lyra's restless form stilled, her breathing less strained. The respite was fleeting. Michael's internal diagnostics, projected onto a cracked display, confirmed his worst fears. The fading had advanced beyond anything his medical capabilities could reverse. His medkit, designed for human physiology, was useless now. They were out of time. He knew the only remaining option was the Triarch bond. But Lyra and Vestra were too weak, barely conscious, their bodies shuddering on the precipice of biological collapse. How could they participate in a sacred ritual, a conscious act of will, when life itself was slipping from their grasp? Michael's gaze swept the damaged mole's interior, frantically searching for any remaining system, any tool that could stabilize them, even for a few precious minutes. His eyes locked onto a specialized neural interface module, usually reserved for syncing operators with planet-scale terraforming machinery. Its purpose? To harmonize consciousness with vast, complex systems. An insane thought sparked in his mind. What if? He hypothesized that the neural interface, combined with the chamber's unique, life-affirming energy, might create a temporary psionic bridge. It could link their minds, allow the bonding to proceed even with their current weakness, overriding their fading biology with a forced technological connection. It was a long shot, a desperate, untested gamble, but it was all they had. Then the mole's external sensors shrieked a warning. Cathar seismic signatures, unmistakable and horrifyingly close, were rapidly converging. They hadn't just found the mole, They'd tracked them to this very chamber. Time had run out. Michael moved with a frantic precision born of absolute desperation. He tore the neural interface module from its housing, the delicate wiring a tangle in his shaking hands. This experimental procedure was their final chance, the last defiant act before both the cathar and the inexorable decay of the fading claimed them. Vestra, her eyes barely slits, a ghost of her former strength, weakly reached for Michael's hand. Her fingers brushed his, a feather-light touch, a silent acknowledgement of the desperate gamble he was about to take. Lyra's silver patterns, almost invisible moments before, flickered with a faint, hopeful resurgence, as if subconsciously connecting to the chamber's energy, to the promise of the impending ritual. Michael took a deep, shuddering breath. He strapped the interface onto his own head, then carefully, gently, secured the other two leads to Vestra and Lyra, positioning the contact points against their temples. Their skin felt unnaturally cold beneath his fingers. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, the humid air thickened his lungs, and initiated the neural interface, bracing for an unknown, potentially catastrophic outcome. The neural interface flared to life, not with a hum, but a jarring, internal thrum. Michael's consciousness reeled, assaulted by a sudden, overwhelming flood of raw sensation. It was as if a dam had burst, and the currents of Vestra's fierce tenacity and Lyra's fragile, aching hope surged through him, amplified by the geothermal chamber's pulsing energy. Their essence, vibrant yet fading, entangled with his own. Within that maelstrom, he felt them, a profound silent plea, echoing not in words but in the deepest chambers of their shared being. Their combined will to live, a desperate, incandescent ember clinging to existence. Their acceptance of him, raw and absolute, as the anchor they needed, the protector they sought. Their need for the triarch bond was a palpable hunger, a biological imperative that resonated with every fiber of his own spirit. He watched their vulnerability, felt the depth of their hope, and in that instant, Michael Reyes, the solitary engineer, shed his last lingering doubt. He consciously, fully accepted the monumental commitment, his own will forging a bedrock of decision in the swirling current of their connection. Michael's acceptance rippled through the burgeoning link, a quiet affirmation that became a seismic wave. The neural interface, now a living conduit, pulsed with energy, solidifying the triarch bond. On Vestra and Lyra's skin, the intricate silver patterns erupted, no longer flickering, but burning with a brilliant, steady glow that momentarily encompassed Michael's own form, a halo of intertwined life force. He was overwhelmed not by the external light, but by the internal explosion, a rush of shared emotions, fragmented memories, the distinct personalities of Vestra's fierce loyalty and Lyra's gentle longing merging within his own consciousness. It wasn't a loss of self, but an expansion, a profound, intimate, three-way understanding blossoming in the heart of his mind. The intense, steady light from the sisters' skin patterns pulsed with an undeniable vitality, a clear signal. The fading had stopped. Their life force was stabilized, their biological equilibrium restored. A silent breath of relief passed between them, a shared sigh in the landscape of their merged minds. Michael now possessed an immediate, intuitive awareness of the sisters' emotional states and intentions, a nascent psionic link humming beneath his thoughts. Their silent, instantaneous communication was a new language, more intimate than any spoken word. Vestra's eyes snapped open, no longer clouded with pain, but vibrant with renewed strength. The silver patterns on her pale lavender skin pulsed with robust vitality as she flexed her hands, feeling the rush of recovered power throughout her body. Her warrior's spirit, once dimmed, now blazed. Lyra stirred, her deeper violet patterns glowing intensely. Her psionic abilities, once latent and fragile, now fully awakened and stabilized by the bond, surged. She projected coherent thoughts, impressions, not just to Michael, but to Vestra as well. They are coming. Lyra's amplified psionic senses, a torrent of information, instantly detected the Cathar Syndicate's tunneling vehicles breaching the final rock layers outside the geothermal chamber. She projected clear, terrifying images of their impending entry, the grinding drills, the armored hulls, the dark predatory forms of the Cathar soldiers packed within. The newly bonded trio, communicating seamlessly through their shared consciousness, rapidly assessed the Cathar threat. The confined chamber offered limited defensive options, but their minds worked as one, a rapid-fire exchange of tactical data and environmental analysis. Michael, his engineering expertise now bolstered by Lyra's psionic insights into the Cathar's subterranean approach, began to devise a desperate multi-layered defensive strategy. He visualized their entry points, their likely formations, mentally mapping the mole's remaining terraforming equipment, repurposing every seismic resonator and rock melter into an improvised weapon. Vestra, her warrior instincts sharpened by the bond, moved with fluid grace. She immediately positioned herself near the breach point, her plasma blade humming in anticipation, preparing to execute Michael's close-quarters combat plan with lethal precision. Lyra, despite her physical recovery, focused her newly amplified psionic energy, preparing to disrupt Cathar systems, overload their comms, and create critical tactical diversions at precise moments during the impending battle. Her mind was a weapon, subtle but devastating. A grinding roar tore through the rock, shuddering the chamber. The Cathar tunneling vehicles breached the wall, splintering crystalline rock as they erupted into the geothermal cavern. Heavily armed ground troops poured out, their blasters sweeping the glowing chamber, searching for them. Michael activated a concealed seismic resonator. The ground beneath the first wave of Cathar soldiers heaved, triggering a localized rock slide that cascaded down, burying them beneath tons of earth and crystal. The combined ingenuity of the newly formed bond had just claimed its first victims. The Cathar commander's furious mental snarl ripped through Lyra's senses, a jolt of pure rage. Surprised by the unexpected and coordinated resistance, he immediately ordered a full-scale assault, directing all available forces and heavy weaponry towards the breach point. Vestra moved. Acting on an unspoken cue from Michael, a flash of shared intent, she engaged the next wave of Cathar. Her movements, augmented by their shared consciousness, transformed her into a formidable, almost prescient combatant, a lavender blur of deadly grace, a sudden shared pulse of absolute certainty. Their thoughts converge, a single unwavering purpose. Vestra moved with heightened speed and agility, a pale lavender blur. Her plasma blade, a searing arc of emerald light, became a violent extension of their collective will. It cut through Cathar soldiers with impossible precision, each swing anticipating an incoming attack before it fully formed. She parried a heavy vibro axe, its impact jarring her arm, but the bond had already shown her the follow-up, and her blade ripped through the soldier's midsection before he could recover. Another lunged and she twisted, letting the bond guide her foot to the Cathar's knee, collapsing him into the path of a comrade, then driving her blade through both with a single, fluid motion. Lyra, her face a mask of fierce concentration, unleashed a focused psionic pulse. It was a silent, invisible wave, but Michael felt its concentrated force ripple through their shared consciousness. Across the cavern, Cathar energy weapons shrieked, their targeting systems overloading in a cascade of sparks and smoke. Projectiles veered wildly, striking rock walls or, more often, backfiring into the hands of their wielders. Explosions erupted among the enemy ranks, disabling several soldiers in a flash of blue energy. Michael, his fingers dancing across the mole's console, directed Vestra's movements with precise, silent tactical calls relayed through the bond. Right flank, blind spot, he thought, and Vestra pivoted, her blade already moving to intercept a hidden Cathar. Simultaneously, his other hand slapped down on a series of pressure plates, activating localized steam vents in the cavern floor. Hissing plumes of superheated vapor erupted, shrouding sections of the Cathar advance in an opaque, scalding fog. The enemy recoiled, their thermal optics useless, their vision obscured, providing a temporary, precious cover for the trio. Above the din of battle, a metallic voice cut through the comms. Their coordination is unprecedented. Deploy shock troops, enhanced shielding, Anti-psionic countermeasures. Advance. The Cathar commander, a hulking figure on a raised platform, slammed a fist on his own console, his frustration a raw spike even Michael could perceive through the bond. Moments later, a new wave of Cathar surged forward, their armor gleaming with an unfamiliar, dull sheen. Vestra's plasma blade, which had effortlessly cleaved through their brethren, now sparked impotently against their reinforced shields, barely scoring the surface. Lyra, straining, sent another psionic surge, but it dissipated against shimmering anti-psionic fields, barely causing a flicker of confusion. A momentary tactical setback. The bond hummed with their combined frustration, a knot tightening in Michael's gut. Too tough, Vestra's thought was a blunt statement, infused with a warrior's grim assessment. Sensing their vulnerability, Michael's mind raced, drawing on the moon's very geology. He activated a secondary protocol, diverting power to a geothermic siphon buried deep beneath their position. With a deep, guttural rumble, a section of the cavern floor began to crack and heave. Scalding water, superheated by Xylos 7's molten core, burst upwards, flooding a widening trench in front of the advancing shock troops. The air filled with the acrid smell of hot minerals and a thick, choking steam. It created a lethal, impassable barrier, hissing and churning, effectively stalling the Cathar advance. The shock troops halted, their enhanced shielding offering no protection against the raw, environmental hazard. It bought the trio a brief, precious reprieve. They fell back, regrouping behind a jagged, crystalline rock formation, its facets gleaming with captured light. Michael took a moment to wipe sweat from his brow, his breathing ragged but steady. Lyra, pushing her psionic limits, her silver patterns flaring brighter, used the bond to project a powerful emotional wave of pure terror and confusion. It slammed into the minds of several unshielded Cathar grunts who had lagged behind the shock troops. Their guttural cries filled the air as they dropped their weapons, some clutching their heads, others turning on their comrades in a frenzy of misguided aggression. The chaos was instantaneous, terrifying. Capitalizing on the Cathar disarray, Vestra charged forward with renewed ferocity, her movements a blur of lavender and emerald. She used the scalding water as a strategic element, her powerful leaps carrying her over the churning trench, funneling the remaining shielded troops into tighter formations. They were now boxed in, a wall of superheated water behind them, Vestra's fury in front. Michael, anticipating Vestra's maneuver, remotely triggered a series of small, precisely aimed laser drills. Hidden in the cavern ceiling, they hummed to life, boring into the rock above the Cathar concentration, weakening its structural integrity with surgical precision. Dust rained down, small pebbles following, a warning of the imminent collapse. The Cathar commander, watching his elite forces being decimated, roared in frustration. "Fall back! Fall back! You fools, they're collapsing the ceiling!" He desperately tried to rally his forces, but his voice was lost in the growing panic. Then a direct, secure comm link opened on Michael's console, the commander's face etched with desperation, filling the screen. "Human, we offer terms. Release the Prilorians, and we will double the bounty. 10,000 credits, untraceable. Your safe passage off this moon." Michael, without a moment's hesitation, used the bond to consult with Vestra and Lyra. Their unified decision, a silent, instantaneous surge of contempt and defiance, affirmed their commitment to each other more powerfully than any spoken word. Then through the bond, Lyra experienced a clear psionic impression of the commander's true intent. It wasn't just about capturing her, not anymore. He wanted to sever the Triarch bond. He saw it as a unique biological anomaly, a power to be dissected, studied, and replicated for his own twisted ends. The thought of them being ripped apart, their connection undone, sent a horrifying chill through Michael. This revelation solidified Michael's grit. The Cathar must not only be repelled, but utterly defeated. The threat to their bond, to their very essence, shifted their objective from mere defense to the active, brutal destruction of the Cathar presence. There would be no escape for these monsters. With the sisters' full consent, their shared psionic focus, a burning ember within him, Michael began rapidly reprogramming the mole's main seismic resonator. His fingers flew across the console, overriding safeties, diverting power, transforming his terraforming tool into a weapon of mass destruction. He aimed it not at the Cathar directly, but at the structural integrity of the entire chamber, specifically targeting the entry and exit tunnels. Vestra and Lyra, understanding his intent, worked in perfect sync. They engaged the remaining Cathar troops in a final, desperate melee, a whirlwind of plasma and psionic energy. They drew the enemy away from the resonator, their combined might buying Michael critical seconds. The Cathar commander, seeing their plan unfold, a cold dread finally settling into his eyes, unleashed a desperate, last-ditch counterattack. Energy nets, crackling with raw power, shot from his specialized troops, designed to immobilize and capture the trio. But Michael, his face grim, completed the resonator's programming. He channeled all available power, the console groaning under the strain, the entire cavern vibrating with a low, menacing thrum. He prepared to trigger the massive seismic event that would seal the Cathar within the moon, burying them alive, a permanent tomb on Xylo 7. The seismic resonator shrieked, a primal scream ripped from the moon's crust. Michael had jammed the activation sequence, pouring every last joule of available energy into the ancient, modified terraforming tool. A wave of raw, destructive power surged through the intricate cavern system beneath them, a silent, invisible tremor that nonetheless shook the very foundations of the lunar surface. Then came the answering roar. Rock, superheated gas, and pulverized debris erupted from the Cathar mole's breach point, a geyser of death that buried the commander and his remaining troops in an instant. The mole itself groaned, its massive drills grinding inward, sealing the cavern with an unyielding finality. Michael, Vestra, and Lyra, nestled deep within a reinforced section of the mole's chassis, felt the impact reverberate through their bones. The bond pulsed, a shared shield of instinct, as they braced against the concussive force, narrowly avoiding being crushed by the immediate, cataclysmic destruction. An eerie, profound silence descended upon Xylo 7, broken only by the distant groaning symphony of settling rock and the ragged, shuddering breaths of the trio. The Cathar threat was over. Michael clambered out from the mole's protective shell, dust clinging to his sweat-streaked face. He stood on the ravaged surface, surveying the fresh, steaming scar where the cavern entrance had once been. A grim satisfaction tightened his jaw, a cold counterpoint to the bone-deep ache of physical exhaustion and the lingering tremor of fear in his gut. Before he could take another step, Vestra was there, her strong arms wrapping around him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. Lyra, lighter and warmer, pressed against his back, her smaller hands finding his waist. The fading was gone. Their forms no longer flickered with that chilling instability. Their intricate skin patterns, once dim and fragile, now pulsed with a steady, vibrant silver light, a living testament to their enduring bond. Through the silent channels of their triarch bond, Lyra's relief washed over Michael. They are gone, Michael. Truly gone. There is no trace left on Xylo 7. A profound sense of peace, deep and unshakable, settled over them, a quiet counterpoint to the battle's recent fury. Back inside the familiar confines of the habitat, the automated medbay hummed softly as Michael tended to a few superficial cuts and scrapes. Vestra and Lyra moved with a newfound grace, their movements fluid, unburdened. They touched their own skin, marveling at the sustained healing power of the bond, the way their aches and exhaustion seemed to melt away faster than any medic kit could manage. Michael leaned against a console, the tension finally leaching from his shoulders. I thought I'd lost you," he rasped, his voice rough with emotion. The words, raw and unguarded, were the most vulnerable he'd spoken in years. He pulled them both into his arms, his guarded exterior finally crumbling, embracing them not just as survivors, but as his family. The terror of their potential loss, a stark reminder of how deeply they had embedded themselves in his solitary life. Vestra rested her head against his chest, her warrior's demeanor softened by an inner peace. "I judged you, human," she admitted, her voice a low murmur, the words echoing through the bond as well. I saw only a threat, an opportunist. But your dedication, your ingenuity, it shattered my prejudices. You forged a trust I believed impossible for any outsider to earn. Her hand rose, her fingers tracing the silver patterns on her own cheek, now glowing with a steady, internal light. Lyra's empathy radiated, a warm, bright wave through their shared consciousness. She nestled closer, her vision of their future, clear and vibrant, unfolding in Michael's mind as if it were his own memory. He saw a strong, loving family, forged in the crucible of adversity, thriving on this red moon. He saw his place, undeniable and cherished in their lives on Xylo 7. Over the next few days, the habitat, scarred by the Cathar assault, slowly transformed. They worked together, a seamless unit. Michael's engineering expertise reinforced compromised structural integrity and recalibrated atmospheric scrubbers. Vestra's tactical knowledge guided the placement of new, subtle defenses, while Lyra's gentle touch and psionic awareness optimized the habitat's biomonitors and energy flow. The damaged refuge became a true home, infused with their shared efforts and the burgeoning warmth of new memories. They explored the full, astonishing extent of their triarch bond. Seamless communication, not just thoughts, but nuances of emotion, rippled between them. Their senses amplified, a shared vigilance stretching across the barren landscape. An astonishing synergy guided their actions, making them feel less like three individuals and more like a single, powerful entity. Weeks later, during a quiet twilight moment, as Xylo 7's twin suns dipped towards the horizon, Vestra's thoughts resonated through the bond, tinged with a delicate awe. Michael, Lyra, I am pregnant. The revelation filled them with a profound, breathless joy, a silent symphony of wonder at the promise of a truly hybrid family, a bridge built not just between individuals, but between species. Months passed. Michael stood on the ridge of the dust-choked canyon, the same ridge where his solitude had once reigned. Beside him, Vestra, visibly pregnant, leaned into his side, her hand resting on her gently swollen abdomen. On his other side, Lyra held his hand, her gaze serene. Michael's geological scanner, once a symbol of his isolated existence, lay discarded at their feet. Its monotonous hum of solitude had been replaced by the silent, powerful resonance of their shared consciousness, the warmth of their hands intertwined, and the quiet murmur of a future unfolding under the watchful glow of Xylo 7's twin suns.